Welcome back.
Welcome back, family, to Hear Us Out. I'm Renee,
I'm Kyrie.
and I want to say thank you, as always, to our longtime subscribers to Hear Us Out and to our new listeners. Thank you for finding us and for hearing us out.
Thank you. And on this episode, we are, like we said in our preamble, we are starting our discussion
Mm-hmm.
on the second book in the Dune series, Dune Messiah. And we talked a lot about why exactly we are reading this at this particular moment, because I think one of the things that we landed on is that it kind of exposes the fallacy of of leadership,
Right.
of that one leader with
Mm-hmm.
ultimate power and all that stuff. And but I don't know how exactly we want to just get into it right away. But I would say that if the first Dune, Dune, the
Mm-hmm.
first book in the Dune series was a tragedy couched in victory. You watched as Paul, lost his father,
Mm-hmm.
and his house was on the brink of destruction, and he was wronged by the entirety of the Imperium. And you see how this young man rises to power to conquer all of his enemies. He wields the ultimate power with this. He's the Kwisatz Haderach. He has all this, prophecy moves around
Mm-hmm.
him. He's the figurehead of this new religion and all this stuff. It's his rise to power. But the entire book is tinged in this melancholy
Mm-hmm.
because we're going, as we see from Paul's personal journey on the inside, how he doesn't want this, and he doesn't want to unleash these forces upon upon
Right.
you know the galaxy, upon us. He
Right.
doesn't want to unleash this. He doesn't want to especially he doesn't want it to be because of him.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't want this to be in his name. He doesn't want this. The entire first Dune book is, Paul is trying to he's trying to curtail as much as he
Mm-hmm.
possibly can.
Right.
He's trying to resist as much as he possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
but he can't die because it's only going to make it worse. The only way that this has a point is if he lives, and if he's able to wield it and direct it in some way, you know. And he you see him kind of surrendering to it at a particular moment, especially as as the story comes to a close, and it's really this tragic, downfall for him, of him being poured into a fate that he never really chose, but
Mm-hmm.
was made for him. But Dune Messiah, the second book in the series, is kind of a victory couched in a tragedy, because Dune Messiah really is a melancholic book. It is a very sad book. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very, I guess, if all you got from the first Dune was Paul's rise to power and
Right.
him punishing and defeating his enemies, then Dune Messiah is a very big departure from that, because he's very sad,
Mm-hmm.
he's very lonely, and and
We even open up with sort of like this sad commentary that's being written by this historian. I forgot his
yeah,
name.
Bronzo.
Yeah, Bronzo, and how he lays out this particular history,
Yeah.
and we see that's, well, for those who know the story, we know that's not the case. And when I was reading, again, the first, well, there aren't chapters in the book, but
Yeah.
the first break, I guess you want to say, there in reading this, and it just reminds me a lot of times of just current historians and how it is that they formulate, these narratives, and put these histories together, and it seems so devoid of the
Yes, but listen, before we actually get
right,
to
all
it,
right, okay, 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 all right,
let's just
right.
set the stage
Stage,
for
right,
what we
okay,
actually read,
right.
right? So, just as like I said, just as a quick recap
Mm-hmm.
of the first Dune, is when we're introduced to Paul, and we're introduced to to Dune, to Arrakis, to the Freeman, and and how he's wronged and how the Imperium has conspiracy against him and his family. And we see his rise to power, how he is able to claim ultimate power,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in Dune Messiah, I think 12 years have passed.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
now I think at the end of Dune, I would say that Paul was like in his early 20s, like 19,
Yeah, I'm
20.
about to say.
Because at the start of the book, he was like a 15, 14 years old.
Yeah, I thought maybe like 18, 19 years old.
Yeah,
So
so he
now I
has to
guess
be
like
like
30.
in his 30s,
Mm-hmm.
early 30s
Mm-hmm.
at this point. It's been 12 years. He is, the ultimate power in the Imperium.
Mm-hmm.
He is the Emperor. He is the Mentat Emperor, as is mentioned. He's the
Mm-hmm.
Mentat Emperor. He's the Kwisatz Haderach,
Right.
which
He's everything.
and the Kwisatz Haderach
Uh-huh.
is the man who can be in many places,
Mm-hmm.
a man of many places, and
Right.
when he's omnipresent,
Mm-hmm.
he's omniscient.
Mm-hmm.
He knows all, he sees all,
Right.
and he is in charge of all things. He's the Godhead of this new religion that is being foisted onto the people of the Imperium.
Uh-huh.
Billions have been murdered in his name.
Right.
The jihad, as we heard in the first book, is
Mm-hmm.
is fully unleashed, and Paul is well, he's very upset about the current predicament he finds himself in
Mm-hmm.
because he's the figurehead of this religion, and is not the galaxy isn't a better place.
Right.
Nothing's gotten better
Better. Right.
under Paul. It's
Right.
just that the coin has flipped,
Flipped. Mm-hmm.
and now the Freeman and Paul Muad'Dib stands at the top of the
That's right.
totem pole, and everybody else is now
Mm-hmm.
at the bottom.
Right.
You know, and and you see how this has affected Paul,
Mm-hmm.
and how from the very beginning of the story, he's never wanted this. He's
Right.
always saw it coming, but he's never wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a call and response that happens when when you rule through oppression and fear, and that's what the Emperor Shaddam the
Down. Yeah.
Fourth,
Right.
he ruled through
Right.
that,
That's right.
and it creates a ripple in the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
A ripple just in us, in our
Right.
society, that has, and now it's like he threw a rock into the ocean, and you see the ripples,
Right.
but now those ripples are bouncing off the walls of the ocean, and now they're all coming back in.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, there's just this tidal wave of blood and death. But now it's happening in Paul's name.
That's right.
It's happening in the name of the Muad'Dib,
Mm-hmm.
and he has this missionary that's been built around him called the Quizzerat.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And these priests who are just going out and
serving up the Lord.
yeah,
Huh? Right.
and entire planets
Right.
have been destroyed.
Destroyed.
Billions upon billions of people are dead.
Mm-hmm.
Because of Paul,
Mm-hmm.
because of what he represents
Right.
to these people,
Mm-hmm.
and what has been done in his name.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, at the beginning of the story, it opens with 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 a historian named
Mm-hmm.
Bronzo of Ix,
Right.
And he has been taken. He has been captured by
Right.
the Quizzerat, and
Mm-hmm.
he is being interviewed by one of the priests of the Quizzerat.
Mm-hmm.
And Bronzo is a historian, and he has been captured because he wrote, the definitive history
Right.
of Paul Muad'Dib,
Mm-hmm.
and he pretty much told the entire truth
Right.
of Paul.
Right.
Right? He talked about how he was trained by the
Mm-hmm.
Bene Gesserit,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that I'm sure the Bene Gesserit don't want people to know,
Right.
that this person was of them. And he talked about all of the things, especially with where he came from,
Mm-hmm.
and how he rose to power, and
Mm-hmm.
all these things. And he just lays it all out. And he's captured by one of the priests of the Quizzerat. The priest is never named,
Right.
and he's going back and forth with this person, and Bronzo is very he gives a very sobering view on what is happening in
Mm-hmm.
Paul's name. He even says, like in
Right.
this particular part, about
Mm-hmm.
how does your emperor, does Paul even know
No,
what
that's
you're
right.
doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And then the priest said, like, we don't bother the family with trivial matters
Right.
like this,
Mm-hmm.
so like atrocities being committed in his name,
Mm-hmm.
without his consent.
Right.
But that's always how it goes. And Bronzo kind of just lays it all out, and
Mm-hmm.
he's going to be executed for
That's
this.
right.
He's
Right.
going to be
Right.
executed. He's going to be
Right.
killed for writing this book. And as
uh.
his last testament, the priest is like, whatever you say, I will record your words.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so he just lays it out.
Yeah.
He lays it out. And if there's one thought that I do want to read,
Mm-hmm.
and that is because the book kind of has an excerpt from his history.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You know, and it does, and this particular podcast does a dual job of catching us up to
Yes.
where we are and kind of leads out where
Mm-hmm.
the book is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not very long, so let me just get into it. Right. Muad'Dib's imperial reign generated more historians than any other era in human history. Most of them argued a particular viewpoint, jealous and sectarian, but it says something about the peculiar impact of this man that he aroused such passions on so many diverse worlds. Of course, he contained the ingredients of history, ideal and idealized. This man, born Paul Atreides in an ancient great family, received the deep Pranabindu training from the Lady Jessica, his Bene Gesserit mother, and had through this superb control over muscles and nerves. But more than that, he was a mentat, an intellect whose capacities surpassed those of the religiously prescribed mechanical computers used by the ancients. Above all else, Muad'Dib was the Kwisatz Haderach, which was the sisterhood's breeding program had sought across thousands of generations. The Kwisatz Haderach then, the one who could be many places at once, this prophet, this man through whom the Bene Gesserit hoped to control human destiny, this man became Emperor Muad'Dib and executed a marriage of convenience with a daughter of the Padishah emperor he had defeated. Think of the paradox, the failure implicit in this moment. For you surely have read other histories and know the surface facts. Muad'Dib's wild freedmen did indeed overwhelm the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. They toppled the Sardaukar legions, the allied forces of the great houses, the Harkonnen armies, and the mercenaries bought with money voted into Landsrai. He brought the Space Guilds to its knees and placed his own sister Alia on the religious throne the Bene Gesserit had thought their own. He did all these things and more. Muad'Dib's Kwisatz missionaries carried their religious war across space in a jihad whose major impetus endured only 12 standard years. But in that time, religious colonialism brought all but a fraction of the human universe under one rule. He did this because capture of Arrakis, that planet known more often as Dune, gave him a monopoly over the ultimate coin of the realm, the geriatric spice melange, the poison that gave life. Here was another ingredient of ideal history, a material whose psychic chemistry unraveled time. Without melange, the sisterhood's reverend mothers could not perform their feats of observation and human control. Without melange, excuse me, the guild steersman could not navigate across space. Without melange, billions upon billions of imperial citizens would die of addictive withdrawal. Without melange, Paul Muad'Dib could not prophesy. We know this moment of supreme power contained failure. There can be only one answer. That completely accurate and total prediction is lethal. Other histories say Muad'Dib was defeated by obvious plotters, the Guild, the Sisterhood, and the scientific amoralists of the Bene Talax, with their face dancer disguises. Other histories point out the spies in Muad'Dib's household. They make much of the Dune terror, which clouded Muad'Dib's powers of prophecy. Some show how Muad'Dib was made to accept the service of a Gula, the flesh brought back from the dead and trained to destroy him. But certainly, they must know this Gula was Duncan Idaho, the Atreides lieutenant who perished saving the life of the young Paul. Yet they delineate the Kwisatz Cabal guided by Korba, the Pangiris. I really don't know how to pronounce that word. The Pangiris. the leader of the Quizet missionaries. They take us step by step through Corba's plan to make a martyr of Muad'Dib and place
Hmm.
the blame on Chani, the freeman concubine. How can any of this explain the facts as history has revealed them? They cannot. Only through the lethal nature of prophecy can we understand the failure of such enormous and far-seeing power. Hopefully, other historians will learn something from this revelation. So
Yeah.
yeah, so like we said, it lays out where we came from and
Right.
kind of where we're going.
Hmm.
You know, it shows that it kind of tells you everything that pretty much is going to happen in the book
Right.
because it talks about the gula, which is something that the Beni Talax do, which is what she says the scientific amoralists, and this is the first time we're introduced to the Beni Talax, and they are because they weren't in the first two,
Right.
but they play a very heavy and prominent role throughout the rest of the books in the series. But the Beni Talaxu are they are biological manipulators,
That's a good way to put it. Right.
scientific immoralists.
Uh-huh.
They are flesh wizards in a
Hmm.
sense. They're able to create these face
Dancers.
dancers,
Right.
which are people who are able to disguise
Yeah.
themselves as other people. They can
Hmm.
change their face, they can
Hmm.
change
Their
their
bodies.
race,
Right.
they
Hmm.
can change their gender.
Hmm.
And they're the ultimate spies.
Hmm.
Able
Right.
to infiltrate our courts, and they have like this ability to mimic whomever they're disguising
That's
as.
what
They can
makes them
perfectly
right.
mimic, whoever
Hmm.
they can psychologically
Hmm.
become that person,
Person. Right.
you know, and they also have the ability to create clones
Hmm.
of people. And Duncan Idaho, who was the sword master of the Atreides house,
Hmm.
who died in the first book, saving Paul, giving Paul and the lady Jessica time to escape. I think he got shot in the head, shot in the face, I
Hmm.
think, stabbed. He was killed,
Right.
and the Bene Talax were able to get a hold
Right. Of
of his
body.
body,
Hmm.
and I think they brought him back to life,
Yes.
right? Because throughout the rest of the Dune series, it's just I think it's a clone
Hmm.
of him, but I think this is just literally the reanimated corpse
Hmm.
of Duncan Idaho,
Hmm.
and he's been brought back to life. And you hear about because I think this historian Bronzo wrote this book a little bit after the
Hmm.
events of Dune Messiah,
Right.
and so he knows kind of how everything plays out.
Hmm.
And and you hear, and so this is a book of about Dune's. I'm not Dune about Paul's fall. If Dune was about Paul's rise,
Rise.
this
Right.
is about his fall.
Hmm.
But let's say it is about this is like I said a victory couched in tragedy
Hmm.
because never forget that Paul never wanted this. Paul never wanted
Hmm.
this.
Yeah,
Paul,
Paul, he even mentions that if he, had his choice, I think this is towards
yeah,
the end, that if he had his choice, that he would not have done any of these things. He just would have been a regular, just in love and
he would have he would have preferred to disappear
peer, right?
from the
Just,
from the world
mm-hmm,
stage, just
right,
not even being a normal person, but just
right,
completely unknown, completely outside of this trap
mm-hmm,
that he finds himself in.
mm-hmm.
And traps are a big thing for Paul. That's how he was tested in the very first book, if you
That's
remember,
right.
with the
With this,
Gom
mm-hmm,
Jobber, and understanding the nature of his trap, which we're going to get into later on when
mm-hmm,
we get to his part
right,
in the book. But like I said, this is something that Paul has never wanted.
mm-hmm,
He's never wanted this. It has been, but he exists as a response, as a consequence
mm-hmm,
of everything that the Imperium was.
mm-hmm,
You know, he exists because because the Bene Gesserit tried to create the ultimate power. They tried to
mm-hmm,
rule over human destiny, and they
right,
created a being that no one can control. Not
mm-hmm.
even Paul himself can control. He has the what I call the Doctor Manhattan problem. If you've ever
Yeah,
read
yeah,
Watchmen or
mm-hmm,
seen the Watchmen movie, that Doctor Manhattan, Dr. Manhattan has claimed the ultimate power. He's a god for all intents and purposes,
Mm-hmm.
but he has the ultimate perspective, which doesn't mean that he's free. He just sees the strings,
Mm-hmm.
better than anyone else. So Paul is acutely aware of all the things that are pulling him in a particular direction. He isn't free to make his own
Mm-hmm.
make his own choices
Right.
in this. I guess you could say no one is, but Paul's thing is that he is the Quintus Haderach. He is all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, he is all of us, all of the forces, and he sees exactly how they're pulling
Mm-hmm.
at him, and he does not want this because, like I said, it doesn't make the world. The Imperium is not better.
Right.
The world is not better, and in many ways, you can say it's worse because now it's caught in this jihad, in
Mm-hmm.
this endless torrent of death and blood.
Mm-hmm.
All being done in
His
his
name.
name, and this is so Paul is able to bring that to a close in this story. This particular part of his rise, the jihad comes to an end by the end of Dune Messiah.
Right.
And there is a victory in that. That is, his victory, being able to end this,
Mm-hmm.
being able to truly put this to an end. But it requires
Right.
so much
Much.
of him and
Mm-hmm.
the people that he loved. And so yeah, we're gonna get into because the very first part of Doom Messiah kind of just lays out everything that's going to happen in the book.
Right.
It lays out everything. It does what the first Doom does. There's no surprises in here. It tells you exactly where it's going to go, and you just follow it
Mm-hmm.
along the way. So yeah, and so in the first few chapters, we deal with Bronzo and we deal with the histories, and it kind of just lays the foundation
Mm-hmm.
of the Imperium is not better because of Paul.
Right.
Things are here. People still are suffering. There are
Mm-hmm.
still atrocities. Things aren't better.
Mm-hmm.
And in the next chapter, we get into we see all of the conspirators, all of the
Right.
people who are working against Paul,
Mm-hmm.
toiling for his downfall.
Yes, in this Skytail.
Skytail or
That's
Sidetail,
yeah.
however you
How do you
pronounce it.
right?
But I say Skytail.
I say Sky and
He is a face dancer.
mm-hmm.
He's the first one we're introduced to.
Right, and we also know about Irulan. That's his
The
wife.
Princess Irulan, who
Yeah.
we were introduced to at the end of the first
Right.
Dune. So we didn't really get much of
Right.
her in that, but we get whole
A
lot
lot
more
more
of
of
her
her. Right.
in
Yeah.
Dune.
She's
In Dune Messiah.
she's Paul's wife only in
She was the key to the throne.
right. Only in
He
right.
married her to legitimize his claim to the
Right.
throne, and that's it.
And that's it.
She
That's it.
because of her problem is that she has not been able to. They aren't their relationship is not sexual at all.
Nah.
That's because Paul is with Chani.
Right.
That's his true wife,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the person who is going to bear his heir.
Right.
Who's going to be the
Even though
mother of this
Irulan,
new dynasty.
she
But
definitely
Princess Irulan,
yeah she definitely
she
wants
wants to be that.
that
You
blood
know,
royal
to
line.
be able to mother a whole new dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul is like no.
No.
So that's why she's
a part of it.
that's why she's a part of the
And
conspiracy.
um
There is the Reverend Mother
the
Gaius
Reverend Mother
Lahane,
yeah
whom we're
she
introduced
is
to
still
in the
here
first Dune.
right she's
It's
still here.
only 12 years that have passed.
Yeah, but she
Yeah,
but, you know she was
she was old.
yeah, she's old, but she's still
She's
here.
still here, and so she was the one who administered Paul's Gamja
Right.
test, which
And we're also introduced to Edrica.
Edric.
Edric. Why I say Edrica?
Mhm.
Edric.
And Edric is, I think he is the very first guild steersman that we're
Mhm.
introduced to, and he is this human who has been mutated
Mm-hmm.
by the spice melange
Mhm.
into like this fish
Right.
human.
right. It's like
He's a fish man,
uh-huh.
and he's a guild steersman, which means that he is the pilot of the giant liners, these giant highliners that fly throughout the Imperium.
Mm-hmm.
And he has been mutated by the spice melange to be able, because the spice melange gives one prescience.
Mhm.
It gives one the ability to kind of see the future, and through that ability, he's able to chart the most optimal and safest paths throughout the imperium, through the imperium, and they're able to move along these paths at translight speeds, instantaneously moving throughout the imperium. And he has been mutated to be able to do that job.
Right.
He's a prescient fishman who is able to pilot the Highliners throughout the Imperium,
Right.
and he's there
Mhm.
because he's been forced into submission
Yes.
by Paul as well, and and he doesn't like that.
Right.
So there's a lot of big players here.
Mm-hmm.
All of the big players of the Imperium who used to rule have now come together
Right.
to try to overthrow Paul.
Mm-hmm. And they're conspiring, to come up with, of course, with this plan to do this.
So and they meet on Wallachia.
Yeah, that's
Which is we see later in a lot of in the later books, but this is kind of the main the head planet of the Reverend Mothers of the Bene Gesserit, and they've all come here to really what this chapter is that they've all come and they've invited the Princess Irulan here. They're trying to get her in on the conspiracy because she's not convinced that they can actually take Paul.
Right. At first, it appears to Skytail, well, that maybe Irulan might be the weak link with them, but
the weak link is
Edric. Yeah, we know that. But
they
at
all
the beginning,
all don't like Edric.
Yeah, because he's not as sharp as he thinks that he is.
Yeah, he's not.
In regards to the plan.
He's nowhere near as sharp as the Reverend Mother.
Right.
And Skytail has proven himself to be far beyond him as well.
Right.
He's kind of just there because he is able to use his prescient abilities to block Paul's view to block his omniscience.
Right.
To block his omnipresence. And they don't know but prescience is not an exact science, not even in the Dune story. They don't know how far he's able to block them out or for how long or how much, but they know that he's able to obfuscate them a bit.
Yes.
So that's why he's there. And really this chapter is about trying to convince Princess Irulan to get in on their conspiracy because if the princess isn't convinced, and if she doesn't join them, there's a chance that her not joining creates a ripple in the prescient pool and exposes the whole thing to Paul. Right. So they need her to join. So Skytail is doing his best, and Edric is doing his best as well.
Yeah,
but he's not as quick as everyone else. So Skytail is doing his best to try to convince and bring
Irulan
into the fold.
And the plan, a part of the plan is to create their own
Kwisatz Haderach. That's one of the things that they touch on, and it's not explored throughout any of the other Dune books, but it's something that they quickly touch upon here. Is that the Bene Tleilax created their own Kwisatz Haderach, a Kwisatz Haderach of pure evil.
Right.
They slanted him morally.
Right.
Because emotions are, especially those on the end of the spectrum of pure good and pure evil, are much easier to distill and create an absolute. And Paul is an absolute. He's the absolute of everything. So they created their own version of that, of an absolute evil. And they're able to do that because they're flesh wizards. Right. So they created like this clone of Paul, this pure evil anti-Paul in a sense. And they say that this Paul he killed himself. This Paul killed himself because he knew that he was merely a reflection, merely a facsimile of what he really was supposed to be, of the real Paul. And instead of being, this puppet, instead of being, controlled by the Bene Tleilax, he chose to kill himself.
Right.
And that gave them insight on how to take down Paul.
Right.
So the plan here, the plan that they've come up with, is that they brought Duncan Idaho back, the Gula, he is called. And but he doesn't go by the name of Duncan Idaho. He goes by the name of
Hyatt.
Hate.
Oh, it's hate. It's I. Well,
Hayt.
yeah, I call it Hyatt.
Hyatt,
Yeah,
but hate.
hate. Right.
Right. I just I find it funny that
Right.
and the Duncan Idaho his name is he calls himself Hate. The name
Right.
is Hate, and they're going to present him as a gift
Right.
to Paul. They're going to present Hate. That kind of
Right.
this slick little game that they're playing. They're going to present him
Mhm.
the Gula Hate as a gift
Mhm.
as a gift to
To Paul.
Paul.
Mhm.
And this gift is meant to poison his psyche, is meant to put him in such a deep melancholic state
Mhm.
that he kills himself.
Right.
Right. And the idea is that he's going that the Gula is going to tell Paul exactly why he's there.
Right.
You can't hide
Hide
that
it.
from
Right.
him. So he's going to tell Paul that anyway, but they're assuming that he's not going to get rid of the Gula
Mhm.
because it is a reanimated Duncan Idaho. Not going to just get rid of him, and that his purpose there is going to serve to poison his mind
Right.
even more, and that he's going to be able to use his high hate is going to be able to use his his guile and his attractiveness to throw Aaliyah
Yeah.
off her game.
Mhm.
And the entire idea is to poison Paul's psyche, to get him to kill himself.
Mhm.
And they're all backbiting and plotting against each other. But the Bene Tiliacs, they want to create their own
Oh,
Kwisatz
right.
Haderach,
Mhm.
one that they're able to control.
Troll. Mhm.
You know, that's the entire idea. And if this plan goes the way that they wanted to, that's how it's going to happen. And throughout that particular chapter,
Right, and we find out that also that Irulan, of course, she wants to have a child
yeah,
by Paul, and she has been, I guess you could say, dipping in Chinese coffee, administering a contraceptive, so that Chinese, you know,
because if you remember from the first Dune
mhm,
book, they had a child,
right,
but the child ended up dying
right,
in the war.
mm-hmm,
You know, and since then she hasn't been able to conceive
right.
another child for Paul.
And the reason
And the
why,
reason why is because Princess Irulan has been secretly
giving
her a contraceptive.
hmm and so with that, in mind, she wants to have this child to, like you mentioned, to create this new.
That's what she wants.
Yeah.
She wants to mother a new dynasty.
Right.
There's just a little quote from this particular part. I think it serves to is one of my it serves to really highlight what the Bene Tiliacs are about, and it's another really good quote.
Mhm.
There's a lot of good quotes, a lot of things
Mhm.
that they're just applicable to everything, right? So this is Skytel. I think he's talking to the Princess Irulan.
Mhm.
It says, "We of the Tailaxu believe that in all the universe there is only the insatiable appetite of matter, that energy is the only true solid, and energy learns. Hear me well, princess. Energy learns. This we call power."
I actually wrote that down.
Yeah, you wrote it down?
I wrote it down. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I had, because there was a few, points that the author makes,
Yeah.
of course,
Throughout the entire
throughout.
And so that really shows to highlight that
Uh-huh.
one of their names that called the what Bronzo calls them is the scientific immortalists.
Mhm.
These people are very, very materialistic, and their entire philosophy is very materialistic,
Mhm.
and they believe the only true thing in reality is matter, and the only true matter is energy.
Right.
And energy consumes. It is looking to consume,
And it can learn.
And for it to optimize that process of consumption,
Mm-hmm.
the optimization of energy is what they call power.
Mm-hmm.
And energy learns.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another little thing that serves to show the at least how I what I feel to be the the limitations of the Bene Tilex and the limitations of the material universe in and of itself,
Mm-hmm.
especially from a human point of view.
Right.
That and how it's able to serve us in the long term.
Mm-hmm.
It really it fails because it can only think in terms of material. It
Mm-hmm.
can only think in terms of consumption
Right.
because that's all energy ever does, right? And if you think that's the point of our existence, if that's the point of life, that's the point of energy, right? And you boil it all down to that thing, you get a very skewed view of what living actually
Mm-hmm.
is. You
And that's the
know,
thing that Paul, I guess, misses the most is that he's not really able to
live.
live.
And
Mm-hmm.
and the Bene Tilites, you can say, are now aren't truly alive in a sense
Right.
because they
Mm-hmm.
have this very, let's say, amoralistic view of what life is,
Mm-hmm.
and all they see is consumption,
Right.
right? And I like that. I like energy learns. I like that
Yeah.
as energy learns. We
Mm-hmm.
call that power. And in that particular vein, I can see it is true.
Mm-hmm.
The optimization of consumption, that is power,
Mm-hmm.
but it fails to truly be able to describe what a human is, what life is, and that's one of the reasons why I think they can't really contend with someone like Paul,
Right.
because Paul, yes, he has surrendered a bit of his humanity to become what he has become,
Mm-hmm.
because he's not really a human in the pedestrian sense of the word. He's
Right.
not normal,
Right.
you could say.
Mm-hmm.
He's superhuman.
Mm-hmm.
He is all that we can be and more. But he is still. I think it's one of the things that Bronson points out when he's being interviewed by the by
The Quizarate.
the
The
Quizarate,
Quizarate. Mm-hmm.
is that Paul and Aaliyah, they come from humans.
Right.
They come from human stock, and they are people who have
Mm-hmm.
lived lives and who have been affected
Mm-hmm.
by the things that they have gone through.
Right.
They are still very much people. They are
Mm-hmm.
still very much human. You know, but they are that and more so.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a skewed uh, purely materialist view of what a human is and what a life is meant to serve,
Mm-hmm.
then you're starting off wrong.
Right.
Just and even trying to understand what Paul is about.
Right. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, you're starting off wrong. You
Right.
you can't you won't even be able to approach
Mm-hmm.
what Paul really is about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why you could say Paul has been able to defeat them, why Paul is able to outmaneuver them, why
Mm-hmm.
he is omniscient.
Mm-hmm.
Because his humanity has not taken him outside. He has become everyone.
Mm-hmm.
He's become all of us. And that's one of the things that we touch on later on
In Messiah. Mm-hmm.
in Messiah. But this story is really about how power fails, how Paul's power fails, or
Mm-hmm.
just how power in general fails.
Right.
And the true power in that statement
Mm-hmm.
is is it is the picture it is meant to paint,
Mm-hmm.
what is meant to show us.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks that he's exposing a
Mm-hmm.
bit of what we are, or what
Mm-hmm.
humanity at large is. But what he's truly exposed is what he is,
Mm-hmm.
and how far he's willing to go, and just how stunted his view is, and why even he is doomed to fail.
Right.
Why the Bene Tilites are even doomed to fail.
Right. And so with the continuation of the power, because I had to actually
Mm-hmm.
wrote that down, is that you know power, it's always vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
to a greater power.
And I think that's
Uh,
one of the quotes.
yeah,
Um, I think that's later on.
yeah, that's
That's from.
I think that's
Paul's section
yeah.
because I wrote
You know,
that
I
part
was just
down. Yeah, it
right.
says
Mm-hmm.
a Bene Gesserit axiom slipped into his mind. To use raw power is to make yourself infinitely vulnerable to greater powers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like it's one of those, and there's an axiom that is visited later on
Yeah.
in the Dune series as well. Like we said many times before, is that the destiny of power is to meet a greater power,
Mm-hmm.
and that if you can only create through power, then your greatest weakness is power
Power
itself,
itself.
and there's
Right.
always more of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, and in this the Kwisatz Haderach, or even with the priests being able to have prophecy,
hmm
right, and to see, I guess, to see into the future, right? But the thing is that, as I guess, I think there's something that Skytail had mentioned is that the future is the thing that is to be shaped, right? And that's the thing I think that Skytail is trying to do, with their plan is that they want to shape the future versus
that's what
allowing it.
one of the things that
Mhm.
we've touched on to do is that life isn't a mystery to solve; it's a
Right.
reality to experience,
Experience.
right?
Hmm.
And let's say everybody's trying to, like you say, shape the future.
Right.
Everybody's trying to control it.
Hmm.
Tinkering towards utopia.
Yes. Right.
Everyone's trying to do that. The
Right.
Bene Gesserit created the Kwisatz Haderach
Hmm.
to, like I said, to control human destiny. They
Hmm.
wanted to control the future. They wanted their own captive god,
Hmm. Sounds
but you can't
familiar.
control that.
Right. Right.
No one can.
Right.
And even the Bene Tilites are trying to create their own Kwisatz Haderach,
Right.
trying to shape the future, trying to
Hmm.
control things.
And that's where you fall into the
That's
trap.
where it fails.
That's where it always fails.
Because Paul, I said that's the fallacy of the ultimate powers. That
Hmm.
power itself is its weakness.
Hmm.
You know, and this book, like it's about how power fails. It's about how Paul, who has harnessed the ultimate power. He
Hmm.
is everything. He's the Mentat Emperor, the Kwisatz Haderach. He is all things and everything, and he's just so unassailable. He is on high. He's the Godhead of this new religion. He
Hmm.
is everything. But it fails
Hmm.
to change anything.
Anything.
There's still injustice.
Right.
There's still,
Overwhelming death and
this
destruction.
genocide
Right.
that is going on.
Hmm.
War and death and suffering and struggling, and all of these things are still happening.
Hmm.
You know, these things are still happening, and that's one of the things that I talk that Dune has done for me.
Hmm.
Right, this is one of the things that Dune has done for me personally. In that, I often talk about how I've had my revolution.
Hmm.
I say that, and I
Right.
say that in terms of Dune
Hmm.
because you know, as a young black man, I do not like this world.
Hmm.
I don't like it. And there's a burning desire in me to tear it down,
Hmm.
to change things. But I said, for more than that, I have this desire in me for us, for black people to come together and give this world the death it deserves.
Hmm.
And for us to create something and truly show what we're about. I have that desire in me,
Hmm.
because of what this world is and what it means, just on a purely personal level, what it means for me to have to live in this world of sickness, in this sick world.
Hmm.
It's sick, you know, the cost that comes with me, the compromise that I have to make just to exist in this broken world. I want it gone. I want it
Hmm.
all gone.
Right. Right.
Right. But on the same hand, everything that we talk about that goes to try to change things,
Hmm.
that everything that we talk about what our revolution is supposed to be never seemed right to me,
Hmm.
right? Because, like, yeah, death and suffering is wrong when they did it to us, but now we want to inflict it on them and it's supposed to be right.
Hmm.
It's never made sense to me. And one of the things that I say is that, like, if you don't want innocent people to die, then don't start wars.
Right.
right? And that's really what this revolution is, at least how we've stated it so
Mm-hmm.
far, is always that's what it always comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
And but these they're still people.
Mm-hmm.
They're still people. Even though they're standing opposed to you, even though they're on the other side, they're still people. And it's never felt right
Mm-hmm.
to me that, the death and murder is wrong when it happens to us. But when we do it to them, it's righteous and right and all this stuff. And that's why we go out of our way to
Justified.
justify it.
Mm-hmm.
We go out of our way to say, well, they can only learn this one way. They only know one thing, and they're giving us no choice, and blah blah blah, all this stuff, you know. And that's never felt right to me. And
Mm-hmm.
in reading the first Dune, and just the Dune series as a whole, you know, is that you see the fallacy in
Mm-hmm.
that, because Paul's journey is becoming the figurehead of the Freeman people, of a people who feel the exact same way that I do,
Right.
who want to tear down this society that has oppressed them, that continues to oppress them. They want a paradise for their people.
Mm-hmm.
They want to, to show what they're about. They want to show that, they want to end it.
Mm-hmm.
They want to destroy this imperium and give rise to something that is for them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they've done that. They've done that.
Right.
And they've done it to the fullest extent. They made war on the Imperium and they won.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's this reckoning throughout the entirety of the Imperium that
Yes.
everyone who has ever had a hand in their suffering
Right.
is paying this price.
Mm-hmm.
Billions are dying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Even the freemen
Cells.
themselves
Right.
are being trampled underfoot by this newness.
Mm-hmm.
This newness that Paul has inflicted on the Imperium.
Right.
Everyone is suffering in this, and Paul himself is able to
Mm-hmm.
recognize the fallacy of it, how it fails, how it's not working, because nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm.
You can say things are worse than ever
Right.
because of Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I say I had my revolution.
Mm-hmm.
I I empathize so much with the freemen. And I don't know how intentional it is from Brian Herbert,
Mm-hmm.
not Brian Herbert, from Frank
Frank Herbert.
Herbert.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Herbert is his son.
Right.
From Frank Herbert, how intentional it is, but there's there's I feel like it's impossible for any black person to read this story and
Mm-hmm.
not feel the plight of
Of
the
the freedman.
freemen,
Mm-hmm.
and just for me personally, and to not also feel for Paul and the inevitability of it all,
Mm-hmm.
and the powerlessness, like this omnipotent impotence. I've
Mm-hmm.
talked about it so many times. This all powerful powerlessness of, you see everything, you see it, but you can't change
Change
it,
it. Right.
because everything that goes to change it only ends up creating it, only
Mm-hmm.
goes to reinforce it. And that's why we're so adamant about the anarchy thing, about the
Right.
something else, because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I had my revolution. I guess I got it out of me in
Mm-hmm.
a sense, and I see the necessity for something else,
Mm-hmm.
because the freemen are not happy.
Right.
No one's happy.
Even in their, I'll say, new position,
Yeah,
right? They are they are still, I'm not gonna say miserable,
they're
but
more miserable now than they were
yeah,
even then.
yeah. But I'm just saying but you would think that, because I'm gonna say they are in charge now, and I'm using the air
Hmm.
that they are in charge, that things would be better for them and better just in general, but it's not. You still have the death, you still have the destruction. As a matter of fact, I mean, you can get killed for the worship and for the non-worship. It's
You're killing someone for writing a book.
right. That's what I'm saying.
This is where we are now.
Right. And so every time I think about the Freeman, and when I think about Paul,
Hmm.
because we've read the book and we've talked about it extensively. I always think about Malcolm X, and of course I think about black people, and how it is that at one time Malcolm, he was so angry,
Hmm.
and yes, bloodshed, and this is how it has to go. But we also know that in that same autobiography, he realized that's not necessarily the case. And it's the same thing I think about even with Paul, is that at one time he was a
Well,
teenager.
he never was.
Well,
He never
right,
was. That's his thing. That's what made it so tragic.
hmm
That he never was any. He played this role, because it was foisted onto him
right, but,
by the
but
Imperium at large, by
right,
all these people who were trying to
troll
control the
him.
fate
But
of the galaxy.
but
And
what I'm saying is
now,
that all that death, like that type of approach. I'm not saying that's the approach that he wants to take, but he realized immediately. He realized that this is not the route. You say this is what you want, but this is not what you. This is not it. This is not the way that we ought to be going.
just for a personal level for Paul,
hmm
this is not what he
He
wanted.
wants.
He's never wanted it,
hmm
right? He's never wanted any of this.
hmm
But the thing is that, but he's the Quinzet's Hatterite,
Right.
and like I said, the ripples and the wave has returned,
hmm
and it was going to come one way or the other.
hmm
It was just his lot in life to be the figurehead, to be the axis on which these things are happening.
Right. And when Skytail, when he gave a description of the freemen, I mean, in this particular, he says, that the freemen are civil, educated, and ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
They're not made, they're trained to believe, not to know. Belief can be manipulated. Only knowledge is dangerous.
Mm.
You understand me? And so when I, read even the first time, of course, it resonated because that's that's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we know, but we're
We
easily
don't know. Here's what I'll say.
we're easily manipulated because we fall into the beliefs and we think that our belief is going to make us
That's what we
right.
do.
It's going to make us right.
We believe.
Yes, we believe, and it makes
We
us.
don't know. Here's what I say. We're smart enough to recognize that there's something wrong
Right.
here.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
I forget why I hear this.
Mm-hmm.
There's being smart is easy. Being stupid is easy.
Mm-hmm.
Being smart enough to recognize being smart enough to want something more, but being too stupid to get it, now that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we find ourselves.
Right. Right.
We're smart enough to recognize
mm-hmm.
that there's something wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
We're too stupid to do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just stuck in this trap.
Right. Because we feel that our beliefs, right? We have this belief that it has to go a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we know that in going that way, that something is wrong. But because we're so stuck in that belief, it makes us easy to manipulate.
Mm-hmm.
We're not as dangerous as we think we are because we're not working from what it is that we really know, and we
mm-hmm.
know that something is wrong with that. And so when looking at it again, and even the first time, because I think when we read we read together the first time, we actually had to break and we had to talk, and we talked about this particular moment because that's where we are. And I feel, like even with Frank Herbert, I mentioned it before to you, that
mm-hmm.
I was so happy to be introduced, to him in the six books and reading them with you, because I kept saying it answered the things that I thought, were being answered before.
Mm-hmm.
You understand me? But it gave me another perspective, particularly when it comes to power and the fallacy of leadership, those type of things. So that really,
so
resonated.
like I said, Paul has harnessed the ultimate power,
mm-hmm.
and it has failed. That's all it can do.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, there's
right.
one more chapter for us to talk about,
right?
And
another
this
break.
Is, and this is the final chapter we read is when we finally finally are reintroduced to Paul.
Paul. Mm-hmm.
Right, we see all the players,
Uh-huh.
all the co-conspirators. The stage has been set by
Mm-hmm.
Bronso and all the things, but now we're reintroduced to Paul. Like I said, it's 12 years later, and like I said, he's lonely and angry,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Frustrated.
frustrated and all these
Because I think
things.
didn't he just he walk he
Yeah,
just he comes
he
back from his
disguised
walk, yeah,
himself
disguises himself.
as a wild freeman,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he's been terraforming the planet, so that and he's in the city of Arakeen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a lot of more water abundance on the planet, so people don't really have to wear their steel suits as much and all that stuff. But he disguised himself of as a wild freeman, as a
Mm-hmm.
freeman of the old
Right.
ways, and so a lot of people, kind of give him
Give
some
it
feet,
space.
so
Right.
to
Right.
speak,
Right.
because if we know anything about
But
them
the
freemen from 12 years ago,
right.
you
Get their
know,
space.
so
Right.
yeah, and but he just does that so he can just walk
Mm-hmm.
amongst people,
Right.
and so he can just exist
Mm-hmm.
in the as a person,
Right.
right? Not as the emperor.
Right.
And he's gotten back to his room.
Mm-hmm.
He's stripped down and everything, and Chani comes in with the pot of coffee that he won from Jameis, in their duel to the death way back when in the first book.
Right.
And she pours him coffee,
Mm-hmm.
and she begins to have this very you could say uncomfortable conversation for
Conversation. Right.
Paul,
Mm-hmm.
because Chani is trying to convince Paul to have an heir with Irulan,
Right.
right? Because Chani overheard a conversation between Irulan and Paul when
Mm-hmm.
Irulan got back from Wallach, and Irulan kind of, you know, she wanted to plant her feet
Right.
and give an ultimatum to
Right.
Paul, but Paul, like from the very first,
Right.
completely like
Go
she's already
silence away.
like just from what he said to
Right.
open the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
her confidence waned.
Right.
But she put up and said, "Give me an heir."
Right.
And he's like, "No." And he said,
Right.
"Well, I'll go out and find someone and
Right.
just claim to have your heir."
He's like, that's
And
not
and
gonna
then he was
work.
like,
That's not gonna
"Don't
work. Don't
don't
don't do
do that.
that.
Like,
Right.
how you gonna stop me? I'll kill you.
Right. Basically.
I'll kill you."
Mm-hmm.
And
And the
you're like,
child is
"Look,"
not mine.
and you're
And
like,
I will
She's
make
like,
sure.
you're like,
Right.
"I'm not. I don't want to be cruel to you.
Right.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
not. I'm just letting you know.
Mm-hmm.
You can have any
Mm-hmm.
lover
Yep, you
you
want.
want.
Right. As long as
You
you're
can
discreet, yeah.
develop any relationship
Ship you
you want.
want, right.
You don't even have to be discreet. I don't care.
But he he
Just
he says that,
he said,
as long as she's
you're discreet,
yeah,
but more importantly, you will not sire any children.
children, right.
And moreover than that, you will not sire any children in my name.
Name, right.
Only I say who
Who
is
is
my heir.
right.
I am in complete control of whomever's going to get that throne
Right.
after me. Period. You will not. And if you even attempt to,
Right.
I will have you garroted, as
Right,
he
that's what he
said.
said, right.
Choked to death. I will
Right.
kill you.
You kill right.
And then Irulan, she kind of throws her hands in there and says, well, the consequences are on your head. Right? Because Paul keeps Irulan around to kind of gauge where his enemies are.
Right.
Because he knows that Irulan is plotting
against him, right.
And Chani also knows.
Mm-hmm.
And China is thinking that, well, if you were to give her a daughter, then they would throw our enemies off and they would throw her off.
Mm-hmm. And he's like,
to give her a child.
And he says to himself, that's exactly what a freedman would say.
Yeah, because that's
right.
a very Freeman
right.
decision. Chani,
right.
in her soul, in her heart,
Mm-hmm.
does not want Paul to
have a
share
right.
his bed with anyone.
Right.
But polygamy is a thing that has existed amongst the
freemen, right.
And she's willing to make this sacrifice
Mm-hmm.
to protect Paul and everything that they've built. And she doesn't know about the contraceptives that Irulan has been
at this time,
her.
at this moment.
So she hasn't been able to give him an heir.
Mm-hmm.
She's feeling, a bit guilty about that herself. But Paul dismisses it completely.
Mm-hmm.
All families know,
right?
Because if you give in to one of Irulan's plots,
right.
you further all of her plots,
mm-hmm.
and you don't want to give. I don't want to give control,
right?
And if that happens, then that puts Chani in danger.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't want any competing heirs.
Right.
So if he fathers an heir with Irulan, then they might kill Chani to make sure that, he can't, there are no competing heirs to the throne. It puts her in danger, and it lessens her status
mm-hmm.
in the house as well, because if he develops that type of relationship with Irulan, that puts Chani on a lower pedestal as well, and he's not doing any
Any
of
of
that.
that, right?
He dismisses it completely, and Chani is just very agitated because if if she cannot provide him an heir, if she
Mm-hmm.
cannot, and she just wants to protect her man, she wants to
Mm-hmm.
protect her Usul.
Right.
But Paul knows that it cannot happen that way.
Right.
He doesn't. His like I said, his vision of the future is being clouded by the Dune terror and all this
Right.
stuff. But right now, but one of the conclusions that he comes to, you know, wait, before I get to that, I just there's
Yeah.
Paul is remembering the words of his grandfather, right? And in Dune, we don't really meet his because his grandfather's already dead.
Right.
But there's a tale about how his grandfather died fighting a bull, right, in the bull arena.
Mm-hmm.
And his grandfather says something. I'm trying to remember about how. Let me just go back. Let me see.
What page?
Here we go. Right here.
Okay.
One who rules assumes irrevocable responsibility for the ruled. You are. Yep. Wrote that down. You are a husbandman.
Mm-hmm.
This demands, at times, a selfless act of love, which may only be amusing to those you rule. Right?
That's why I asked you what page. I'm like, 'cause I probably have
And you probably wrote
wrote it
that.
down right.
So Paul finds himself in a position where he must do something
Mm-hmm.
for the people that he rules over.
Right.
And remember that Paul is everyone. So he is responsible for those billions of people who are dying.
Mm-hmm.
He is them as well.
That's right.
you know and so he has to do something. He knows that he must do something as husbandman,
Mm-hmm.
as ruler of his people. He has to do something for the people he rules, and he knows that
Has to
this
be a
thing
selfless act of love.
is going to demand of him a sacrifice,
Mm-hmm.
and that sacrifice is Chani.
Mm-hmm.
He recognizes it as he has this vision,
Mm-hmm.
and he feels it, and he knows that he's going to have to give up on and that's why he's put it off for
Right.
so long. And he knows that he's toiling for so long because he does not want to give up
Mm-hmm.
Chani, but he's trying to choose, you could say, the lesser of two evils here.
Right.
He's trying to end this jihad. He's trying to end it. He's trying to bring this period to a close, trying
Mm-hmm.
to end the bloodshed. But it requires of him to sacrifice, to give up his Chani.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows at the very end, of this, that he just falls into her arms at the
Mm-hmm.
end of it, and he just does not want
Right.
to do it, but he knows he's going to have to. And Paul has come to his own freeman decision.
Mm-hmm.
Because the freemen are the people of the knife. You say you cut it off and then it's done.
Right.
And he's come to his own decision, and he knows what it's going to cost him.
Mm-hmm.
He does not want to pay it, but he knows that as a ruler, as husbandman of his
Mm-hmm.
people, he has to do this.
Yep, because he belongs to a vision.
Mm-hmm.
He's been he's been put he's been put in a site to where any decision that he makes, it's not a decision of his own making.
You can say that it's already been
made. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, in mind, his siege, his place of retreat and refuge, with, Chinese, he also, I guess you could say, he understands how Chinese feels. He understands even Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, he knows that's look.
Paul's one
That's
concern
sir,
here is ending the jihad.
right?
He sees it. He
Mm-hmm.
sees this torrent of death happening in his name. And he also begins to understand how he, in a way, caused it.
Yeah, it's his terrible
Because
purpose.
he a lot of the conversation that we had about the first Dune is nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm.
Is he seeing the future, or is he creating?
Creating, right?
He's always had the potential for these visions, and
Mm-hmm.
he remembers all the way back on Caladan in his room the first time he had this vision,
Mm-hmm.
and how his curiosity and how he gave into that moment, into that vision,
Mm-hmm.
created something. And saying like, let's say, like a bird, taking flight from a branch, right? The moment he saw that vision, the bird took flight,
Mm-hmm.
and he's the branch left moving with the momentum of the bird
Right.
flying off from him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's that limb, that tree branch, just moving. And now the only way that branch could come to stillness
Mm-hmm.
is if he makes this sacrifice, is if he does this thing. He pays the ultimate
The
price.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to pay with the life of the woman he loves,
Mm-hmm.
of his one refuge, the one
Right.
person that he considers his equal,
Mm-hmm.
the one person that he could be human with.
Mm-hmm.
He has to give this person up. He has to give up his humanity,
Right.
his desert spring.
Mm-hmm. That's
He
what
has to
she's
give
called,
it
right?
up
Mm-hmm.
to save the Imperium. And Paul knows. I was gonna say Lord knows.
Right.
Paul knows,
Mm-hmm.
and he does not want to give it
that,
up,
right?
but he will.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, and that's where we ended. But it's like the entirety of that first part
Mm-hmm.
just lays out everything that you're going to see
Mm-hmm.
in this book. He's going to sacrifice Chani. The conspirators are going to try to infect Paul's psyche with hate.
Right.
With this gula.
Right.
And they're going to try to create their own Kwisatz
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And but it's not going to be fun for anyone,
No.
especially for Paul. But this is Paul's greatest victory.
Mm-hmm.
This tragedy, this moment right here, it is his greatest victory. And now we are going to have to come along for that.
Right.
For this victory couched in tragedy. This is how power fails.
Yes.
This is what happens when when that one person harnesses the ultimate power,
mm-hmm.
controls the fate of humanity as a whole. He tries desperately to give it back,
mm-hmm.
to bring it to a close.
Right.
Because when you have that ultimate power, it makes you powerless. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments, and thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you so much.